Good morning, directors. I'd like to call the January 10th meeting of the Electoral Area Services Committee to order, and the first order of business will be the election of chair for the following year. And in accordance with your bylaw, we'll call for nominations from the floor, please.
Hello, Tom. I would like to nominate Gerald Wally as chair.
Thank you, Director Mawhinney. Director Wally, would you accept that nomination?
I do, thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there further nominations for the position of chair for the third and last time? Hearing none, we'll declare Director Wally as chair for 2024. Thank you very much. And now we will move to the election of vice chair. May I have nominations from directors, please? Director Mawhinney.
Thank you. May I nominate, I would like to nominate Director Mark Vanesh for vice chair.
Thank you very much. Director Vanesh, would you accept that nomination?
I do, thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there further nominations for the vice chair position for the third and last time? Hearing none, we'll declare Director Vanesh vice chair for 2024. Thank you very much. Now we'll turn over the meeting to Director Wally, your new chair.
All right, so I'll call the, should I call the meeting to order first, or have we already done that? All right. So I acknowledge that we're located in the traditional territory of the Letchwatach people, and the first item of business will be the adoption of the public agenda.
Move adoption.
Second.
Any discussion on the agenda? All those in favor? That's unanimous and that's carried. No petitions or delegations. Adoption of the minutes, please.
Move adoption.
Have a specific one or all three?
Good question. I will move adoption of the minutes of November 8th, the special meeting on December 13th, and the special budget meeting on December 14th.
Second.
Discussion? Anything omitted? Yes, Rowan?
I do have a follow-up question about one of the items on the special budget meeting. When is the appropriate time to ask that question?
Now would be appropriate.
Okay, great. I'm curious if and what the date and time is that has been scheduled for the budget meeting with the Quadra Recreation Society Board Rep and Executive Director. And that's one question. And the other question is, will the report on the Heritage Conservation Service come forward in time to make adjustments, if desired, to the 2024 to 2028 budget plan?
Go ahead, Tom.
Thank you, through the chair. With respect to the meeting with QRS, we have yet to secure a date and time, but we are looking to do that, and that will happen before January 24th board.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, with respect to the matter of the heritage function, which I believe Director Mawhinney is referring to.
Heritage Conservation Service, I think it's.
Yes, so we anticipate that will be coming to the next board meeting. So I don't know if that answers the question.
All right, call the question on receipt. All those in favor? None opposed, that is carried. Any business arising? I guess we could have fit it in there another time. But. Staff reports. Number 1, 2024 schedule of committee meetings for receipt.
Move receipt.
Second.
Second, Director Rice.
I don't think anything to add, Mr. Chair. I think this follows our previous year's schedule on there, so no real changes to the...
Right, I think Director Vanesh has a comment.
I'm just wondering if the meeting could be pushed till 10, Because coming from Cortez, the earliest I can get here is 9:15 if the ferries run perfectly, and 10 o'clock would sort of assure that I'd never be late.
Absolutely. There's a long history why they were 9:30, but
Yeah, am I missing something? Is it like
no, I'm just kidding.
timing-wise?
I'm
Yeah.
just being facetious. No,
Yeah, okay.
10 o'clock.
Yeah.
I don't think there's anything.
If that works for the other directors.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was predicated on the Cortez rep being able to get here, and we've had much discussion over the years about whether they can get here at 9:30 or not. That was the only thing. So if you can't get here at 9:30,
I often can. It's
nine.
just
No, I
sometimes
know,
couldn't.
but like I say, it was only to support that director. So 9:30, 9:45, 10, whatever suits you is fine.
10's good for me. How about the rest of you folks? 10's fine? We can all sleep in a little bit
I
longer?
think 10's a great idea.
All right,
Because I've
we don't need a
seen,
motion for that, I suppose?
Okay.
Or do we?
Well, Mr. Chair, you're still in receipt, so I would suggest that B, if someone wishes to move B, subject to a 10 o'clock start time, that would be fine.
All right, we'll do it that way. On receipt, all those in favor? And that's unanimous and carried, and the motion, please.
I'll move option B with the slight change of moving the East meetings to 10 a.m. start.
It was option B.
You'd like to read it so it goes into the minutes and the recording?
Move that the proposed 2024 Electoral Area Services Committee meeting schedule attached to the January 3rd, 2024 report from the CAO be approved with the adjustment of changing the start time to 10 a.m. instead of 9:30.
second.
Discussion? All those in favor? And that is carried. Number 2, Black Creek Oyster Bay Water System, request for funding for receipt.
Move receipt.
Second.
I think Sheena will speak to this, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. So the report in front of you speaks about a request from the Comox Valley Regional District for a financial contribution of approximately $85,000 to support the construction of well number 6. Well number 6 is one of the 3 wells that they have secured down at CBRD to supply water to residents of Electoral Area C and a few residents of Electoral Area D. This amount that they're requesting is due to inflationary increases and also the size of a kiosk that was not anticipated to support the construction of the 3 wells. This $85,000 is to start the construction of well number 6, spring 2024, and a completion to the end of the year. This contribution, basically the total amount of money that they are asking is $440,000 is the shortfall. $120,000 will come from development DCCs from CBRD, and $300,000 is a split cost, where $85,000 is from CBRD, and the rest will be from 85 from SRD, and the rest from CBRD. We have 2 options provided in the staff report. Option number 1, that the committee recommend that a financial contribution of approximately $85,000 from the Electoral Area D Community Works Fund for the Black Creek Oyster Bay water be approved, subject to finalization of an agreement regarding cost sharing between the CRD and the CBRD. And option number 2, that the committee recommend that the SRD decline to participate in the share in the cost of the well number 6 development project for the Black Creek Oyster Bay water system.
Thank you, Wolfgang. Any further discussion? Director Rice?
Just a few comments. First of all, I mean, this is something that is required. This area has had a lot of pressure on not having available water. So I thought it was quite good that they were able to make arrangements with Shelter Point Farms. That's where the well is. My only concern with the well itself, it's not so much the money, it's the location. The location, as far as I'm aware, and as far as I've been told by people that are in the know, the location is not the best, but they claim that this well is going to deliver the amount of water that they need. So I would move at this point with option A, but I do want to be mindful that the agreement is for 2 more wells. So there's the potential for more coming at some point in the future. Thank you.
Anything further?
Maybe just a follow-up question. for Director Rice. You're saying that we could get 2 more of these requests?
The thought was that they've negotiated a total of 3 wells, and this one here, they claim that it is going to produce the volume of water that they need. It's just my concern is, and I did try to approach them earlier this year, I know where the water source is on Shelter Point Farms. So this well, I understand why they chose it, because it's close to the pumping station. So it means that they don't have to put in a lot of infrastructure. But it's at the edge of the actual aquifer. So that is my concern, is that, you know, we could be potentially looking at a second well very quickly.
But I think to answer your question, the answer is yes. And I think that gets into the tricky part about when you have a contract services, whether the cost of that services should be all in. For example, Area D pays the contract services for a Campbell River fire. That includes capital, nuts and bolts, the whole 9 yards. So the residents in there pay for the water, but that looks like it's not all inclusive of the capital cost there, which I think is worthy of a discussion at some point if there's further requests coming.
Anything further on receipt? Call the question. All those in favor? And that is carried.
I want to move option A.
Yes, go ahead.
I'd like to move option A, that the committee recommend that a financial contribution of $84,887 from the Electoral Area D Community Grants Fund to the Black Creek Oyster Bay Water System be approved and subject to finalization of an agreement regarding cost sharing between the CVRD and the SRD.
Just for clarity, Mr. Chair, that's the Community Works, not a grant.
What was that?
It's Community Works funds, not a community grant.
Okay, we got that. Thank you.
Second that.
Second by Director Vanesh. Any discussion? Call the question. All those in favor? That's unanimous. That's carried. Number 3, proposed Cortez Island open burning bylaw for receipt.
Move receipt.
Second.
Discussion?
I do have discussion.
Okay, I'll let you go ahead.
I have some amendments and
More
some
amendments?
questions. Well, yeah.
Okay, so then maybe I'll go first. So just on how we prepare bylaws there. So we write a bylaw to try and meet the needs of whatever that service is. Then we vet it with bylaws that exist in other local governments, with our legal and corporate services team, making sure we have the authority within the bylaw, because it's a law, and it's legally defensible. And then we put that down in paper. So when directors, let's say, want to wordsmith the bylaw, it likely dilutes the authority and the legal defensibility that we have in there. So we've written our comments next to your additions in there. And
I think not on this one. This is the water one.
No, we're talking about the
Burning bylaw.
the burning. Thought I was on the wrong one.
I'm on the wrong one. Sorry. Go ahead.
I'm done.
Anything further?
Yeah, no, I really do appreciate that, and I think there are there's a couple changes I would like to go that kind of move it back to the original ideas, but particularly on number 5 and 6, and I sort of would also like sort of discussion on, what is the reality of what happens when a fire does get called in. So once we receive this, I'll make some motions for adjustments.
All righty. We're on receipt then. We'll call a question. All those in favor? That's carried. And a motion.
So regarding number 5 and 6, one of the challenges of the board here is that we can't delegate authority to someone who's not either a director or an employee of the SRD. So, I'm going to make a motion to put it back to manager, because that seems the way it has to be. And, my question is,
Director Vanesh, just make the motion first and then we can.
okay, sure. So I'll make the motion to replace fire chief back to manager in both number 5 and 6 in accordance to what seems that we're able to do.
Oh, second.
All right. Now discussion. Do you want to?
Yeah, my discussion here is, Okay, the province of BC lifts the fire ban. The manager in Camel River talks to our fire chief, and it's decided that it's not in the best interest to lift the fire ban in Cortez. So we keep the fire ban going. Some tourist comes to Cortez, they light a fire. Someone calls 911 to call it in. The fire department gets that call. According to this bylaw, it seems like the manager is the only one that's allowed to come out and extinguish it. So just sort of looking for some explanation around what is the process of how it actually get acted out. I'll go to Tom, yeah, and if Sean has any additional.
Happy to speak to that, Mr. Chairman. My understanding is that the fire chief is responsible for suppression of fires. What we're dealing with here is the ability to look at a regulatory bylaw and be part of the enforcement of that. And that's what we're dealing with as opposed to actually suppressing fires. So the fire chief, I believe, has all the authority needed to suppress fires. There are some issues with entering private property by a contractor that we talked about that. But under the present law, the board cannot delegate authority to someone who is not an officer or employee. And that's the challenge, if you will, faced when trying to draft this type of a bylaw. So in terms of how this would work, I would expect if the fire chief becomes aware of situations that he or she believes might contravene a bylaw, then they would talk to the manager, that would be Mr. Koopman in this case, and either gain authority to do something about it or to write a ticket or whatever the penalties to be imposed, to talk with whoever's responsible. I'm not sure exactly, it would depend on the circumstance, I would expect. But the fire chief would not be able to unilaterally and on their own authority to go on property and tell people that they need to do something and enforce the bylaw. I mean, certainly we would expect the fire chief in Cortez would have eyes on the ground and know what's going on and could certainly talk to people about it. But they wouldn't have the legal authority to actually enforce the bylaw.
Okay, so technically the fire chief would call John Koopman up and say, can you give me authority to go and put this fire out?
I don't think he needs to do that.
Okay.
So, again, this is regulatory. So we'll have regulatory bylaws that, let's say, the RCMP will ask us to create so that, let's say it was about dog control, because that's came up before, in that if we didn't have a dog control service anywhere and there was a rabid dog and it was biting kids and people, the RCMP have authority to go shoot it. They don't need a regulatory bylaw. But for more things like, nuisance and prevention, the regulatory bylaw helps them support that. So the fire chief, let's say you have some tourists come and they want to start a campfire and the fire chief's aware of it. He comes and goes, we have a bylaw that says no campfires, okay? Now they go light a campfire and the fire chief says, that's a safety hazard because of the conditions we're in. And I know it, I'm putting the thing out. Right, that's all there is to it. He's going to make that decision. And then whether we enforce a ticket or something on them, that may come back to us in a regulatory. But the most important thing is the fire chief's going to go, there says no open burning. You're open burning. I know, I'm putting it out, period. So that's what's practically going to happen.
Great. Yeah, I appreciate that. I just wanted to put that out in the public sphere because I think reading this bylaw, people might be confused around how it physically ends up moving through the process, so I appreciate that.
Now, the only caveat to that is the language that you inserted in about going on private property. So it's one thing if, let's say, they're having a beach campfire or they're in some campground, the provincial campground or something, but, we can't delegate the authority. We can't stop the person, but we can't endorse the fire chief on going on private property or entering a premise. And
which one are we looking at here? Number 6?
Where is it there? Tom, help me out. Where was that one? The fire chief is authorized to, or you had scratched the manager. The fire chief, now you may have amended that, is authorized to enter upon property all reasonable times. So we had the manager.
Number six.
Yeah, but then you just flip that to fire to manager. So in that instance, we couldn't delegate that authority and say, oh yeah, go on somebody's property and they're having a backyard fire and we're good with that. We can't do that. So
Okay.
you've cured that with that one.
Great. Thank you. I appreciate all staff's work on getting this to this year. The other,
Do you want to withdraw that
Yeah.
motion you put on the table? Is that-
no, I'm going to keep that motion going. Yeah.
Okay.
Change those two back to manager, and then I do have some other comments.
All right, then,
And I'm confident that this bylaw allows both us and the fire chief, the fire department, to, we wanted to have a greater level of oversight. If they lifted the fire ban, that we could go, no. So this accomplishes that.
so we're good with the motion. We'll call the question. All those in favor? That's carried. Anything further?
Yeah, so my other comments here and potential motion here is on the definition of open fire. So when I initially read this, it said open fire means a campfire or other outdoor fire that is located more than X amount of meters from a dwelling, but does not include a fire contained with an internal combustion engine, or a fire for which a permit has been issued by a responsible authority. So I scratched that is located more than X amount of meters from a dwelling. And, upon further understanding, I realized that is to take care of barbecues. But I'm concerned if we did leave it that way and people see that they can have a campfire as long as it's like right beside your house. So I'm wondering, looking for input here from staff on if we could change the open fire definition to means a campfire or outdoor fire, but does not include a barbecue or a fire contained with an internal combustion engine, et cetera. And then we add a definition for a barbecue. And then that just makes it really specific and clear.
We can certainly try if that's the wish of the committee. And that was the original intent, was to exempt certain types of outdoor fires that might be used within a reasonable distance from a dwelling unit for cooking purposes. That could be a slippery slope, but I think if we put our minds to it, we should be able to come up with some kind of a definition that satisfies that concern.
So do we need a motion to bring it back to the next electoral area meeting?
Yeah, let's do that.
Yeah.
And I think that's a good suggestion too. The more clarity that we have to that kind of stuff, because we don't want to prohibit people from having a barbecue or whatever they do.
Yeah.
And then I don't want them all having to try and interpret it themselves about what that is.
So I'll make a motion there to change the open fire definition to mean a campfire or other outdoor fire, but does not include a barbecue or a fire contained with an internal combustion engine or a fire for which a permit has been issued by a reasonable authority, and that the definition of barbecue also be added to the bylaw.
And we'll bring it back to the next DA.
I'll second that.
And to bring it back to the next Electoral Area Services Committee meeting.
I'll second that part too.
Okay, you got the gist of that, Tom? Yep. All right, on the question, all in favor? And that is carried. Number 4, Cortez Island Seepage Management Feasibility Study. Wait 1 second here, I got jammed up. There it goes. Okay, what was you calling? Septage. 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 All right, for receipt.
Move receipt.
I would like to defer this to the next East, giving the community some time to review the report and provide me with some input on next steps.
I'm good with that. I'll second that.
Okay, motion to defer. Any,
Just a comment, I'll applaud you on doing that, and because we don't have a lot of precedent in that, and I just want everyone to know that it's okay to do that. We have just like other local governments, and we are in the, believe it or not, the high end of providing agendas before meetings. You got to provide them at some point, and then you got to read them and come. And I get it, if there's time that isn't consultation. We haven't had a long history here of folks going, we don't have time to absorb this, which is fine. You only have 5 days, defer it. So it's okay to do that. That's it.
anything further on that one? All right, on deferral then, all those in favor? And that is carried. Number 5, Quathaski Cove Sewer Capacity Review for receipt.
Move receipt.
Second.
Second by Director Rice. Discussion? Director Mawini?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to staff for facilitating and supporting this report. I have a couple questions, and one of them would be, once it's been received by the board, will the report be added to the sewer information page on the SRD website for folks who are following along on developments?
It can be.
Okay. Do I need to make a motion for that, or can it just be, that's, okay, great. I noticed that the report identifies that rainy season flows through the system are an impediment to reaching Quathaski Cove's potential for growth. And it mentions that in storm events, it's estimated that at least 67% of the flow is from infiltration and inflow. And it talks in the report about two things to solve the excessive high flows during the rainy season, and they are raising the height of the manhole covers and also video and smoke testing during or after a rain event during the wet season. So I'm wondering if you could explain the smoke and video testing and what that would accomplish. And then I have another question.
Yeah, thank you. Through the chair to the director. So smoke and video testing is a way to establish whether or not people have connected their roof leaders to the sanitary system, which it should not be. So you shouldn't be putting any of your on-site drainage, including what's coming out of your eaves, directly into the sanitary system. So this helps sort of see where, to vet whether or not people have done that.
Oh, I'm glad to know that, because I was visualizing smoke coming out of the manholes.
Smoke would come out of people's chimneys, essentially, or out of their vents, yeah, for their sewer system inside their house. Yeah.
And then does somebody drive around and video it? Is that the other piece then?
The video, I think, might be a physical video camera within the system to sort of explore where those connections are. You would use sort of a manual evaluation to see where the smoke is coming from, because you need to do it in sort of localized areas. You wouldn't just smoke bomb the whole system.
Very interesting. Thank you for explaining that. So the report also seems to suggest that that major source of inflow or infiltration is through the low-lying manhole covers. Would staff recommend that undertaking the smoke testing would be a good idea prior to the manhole raising, or would it be advisable to doing them concurrently?
So we have considered this. We've known that infiltration for sure is an issue with the system. We have a couple maintenance hole covers that are in the bottom of the ditch. So you can imagine during heavy rainflow, those covers are permeable. There is water just dripping right through the cover. So our intent is to raise some of those ones where it's very obvious that they are sort of below the water mark in high rain events, and see if that has a major effect. So that would be my recommendation, seeing as there are a lot of other impediments to reaching the full build out of the Quathaski Cove plan at this time. We're not really in a position where we're concerned about capacity right now. We've got a few other priorities in the system. So our approach this year would be to identify those really low hanging fruit and see if we see what the results are. We require a period of data to be accumulated to establish whether or not that has created a heavy impact, and then sort of see where we're going from there, and as well as manage all of the other high priority issues we have with the plant. I think inflow is likely the bigger issue, but we really can't say, especially without sort of the building inspection process is determining that people aren't connecting their house leaders to the system. We don't really have a lot of data about whether or not that is the issue. So that's, one or the other. I would personally target the infiltration, which is the manhole system. Inflow is the cross-connection issue.
Thank you for explaining what the difference between inflow and infiltration is, because honestly, the report mostly says I, and I didn't. Yeah. So it sounds like, so then I guess my follow-up question to that would be, is there enough budget already in the sewer folio or service to work on these manhole covers, as you're suggesting, seems to be the primary concern?
Yeah, through the chair to the director. So we have imagined a very, very small version of this. So again, identifying those manholes that are visually in low-lying areas. We have about $80,000 in the budget to deal with all of these sort of minor improvement issues that we have at the plant. And I believe there's capacity in there to deal with these. There's 3 that have been identified that we want to raise. We have not budgeted for the full estimated $160,000 project, noting that we have some other issues that will have a much higher risk of impeding our ability to deliver the service, as we've discussed in previous. So this was not identified as a high priority for us because the capacity came in well within our current needs. But should the directors wish us to elevate the priority of the I&I investigation, we certainly can.
I appreciate you explaining that, and I don't, if I'm happy to hear from the engineers and what their opinions are, and I'm happy to hear that the manhole covers is already planning on being addressed, so I can just leave it at that for now, and I'm sure you'll come to us when you want to throw some smoke bombs.
Anything further on receipt? Call the question, all those in favor? And that's carried. Bylaws. Number 1, bylaw 464, Area D water meter reimbursements for receipt.
Move receipt.
Second.
Second by Director Bonash. Discussion? Seeing none, call the question. All those in favor? That's carried. Recommendation?
I would move B, that the committee recommend that bylaw number 464 be given 3 readings and adopted by the board.
Second.
Discussion? Call the question. All those in favor? And that is carried. Number 2, bylaw 509, Cortez Island bulk water regulation for receipt.
Move receipt.
Second.
Discussion? Seeing none, call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? Oh, do you want to speak to it?
After we receive it.
Did we receive it already?
That was the motion to receive, right? That was the vote on receipt was done. What you just called was the vote on receipt.
I called the vote on receipt, that's right. Director Bonash?
Are you calling the vote?
Yeah, I'm calling the vote, I did. All those in favor?
I thought
Of receipt.
Okay, we've received it now.
twice. Once. Oh, okay. I thought we already did it.
So that's carried. Is there a motion here, or?
Yes, the questions. I think there are some changes I'd like to see happen and open to discussion here. First, I'd like to move that we on section C2 that we remain it as houseboats, and so I'd like to move that section C2 just says houseboats, and I can speak to the reasoning if someone can second that.
I'll second that.
Anything from staff on that? Is that all right?
Well, I'll wait to hear what Director Bonash says. Again, I'll just repeat myself. We consult with legal in terms of enforceability and defensibility of these. And so that's why we have included the language, so.
Yeah, I guess, the reason I'm hesitant to include vessels as liveaboards is that we do have a number of people living in vessels as liveaboards, and if this was passed, it would criminalize sort of some of the most marginalized people on our island, and I'd rather see another solution to their housing situation rather than just saying they can't do it at this stage.
If I may, through the chair, currently the bylaw would enforce upon those residing in a liveaboard. That's not permitted. It's not a residential use. It doesn't meet the requirements of a residence. So regardless of whether or not we clarify what was meant by houseboat, which is what this section is doing, it would still be enforced upon if the SRD received a complaint.
Do we have a motion on the floor?
No motion, correct?
No motion.
I made a motion. It was
Okay.
seconded by Rob.
Do you want to repeat that so Tom gets it down?
I'd move that section C2 be changed to just houseboats rather than the use of vessels as liveaboards or houseboats.
You want to bring that back to the EA or not?
Well, once we pass that. Yes, and to bring it back to the EA.
Who was the seconder on that? Who was the seconder? Robin.
Anything further? Call the question on the motion. All those in favor? That's carried.
I do have another. Section A. I know there's been a lot of discussion around this, and this there's no change that's being proposed here. But I would like to see the section A removed. It does seem overreaching and just saying basically if we don't say it's legal, it's illegal. And just the feedback I've received on Cortez is that we much prefer for things to be explicitly laid out as to what can't be done rather than just saying everything can't be done unless we say it can. So I'd make a motion that section A be removed.
I'll second that.
Anything further, Annika?
Yeah, so thank you through the chair. Regardless of whether that provision is clearly stated within the bylaw or not, that is how the bylaw would be interpreted, and that's how the bylaw would be implemented, and that's how the bylaw would enforce upon a compliance issue.
All right. Director Mooney?
Thank you. It's interesting that I made a motion for that paragraph to be removed from the bylaw 510, and it came back with it in still. So maybe it'll change this time.
So just like we take direction from it, when this comes to the board, though, for certain, we are going to provide the board with advice that legal supports this language should be in. Should it be supported in there? Again, we just provide recommendations and advice. We don't make votes. So whether you didn't like the fact that it was not included or not, we still will side with our legal opinion that it should be included, and should the board not choose to do that, it'll be removed, and there'll be, I guess, less transparency to those enforcement issues that are not expressly defined. So.
All right, we're making recommendations to the board here. I think we all understand that, so.
Yeah, and I did say bring it back to EASC too on this one. And I hear you, and I obviously want to do things right and according to law, and would love to understand the legal opinion better. So I think if that was to come back from the board, having a written legal opinion would really help certainly my constituents on Cortez and myself as a board member here to make those decisions.
Sure. So we don't always, as a practice, share the legal opinions publicly, because in terms of, let's say, enforcement, now there's not a hard and fast rule about what we do and what we don't. It's a judgment call. In terms of that could weaken our enforcement ability should we be challenged on something. So if we do, we may bring that in camera, but we'll often represent at a high level the legal opinions we've received and paraphrase them in here and not give them to them, because those are private property and they form part of our legal defense at times when challenged. So when we will often, you'll see that we've quote and paraphrased legal opinions on there. So you're not always going to get them, and it'll be discretion. And if we do, it'll likely be in camera. So the expectation that people are going to see that, I would lower that.
Yeah,
you
great.
may see it.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you. And I'm also happy to see it in camera. It's just a concern that I'm getting that people are thinking this is going to affect a lot of things that aren't explicitly being said here. And I think the feedback I'm heard is that Cortez would much prefer to be like, if something's not allowed, that we say specifically that it's not allowed, rather than say nothing's allowed unless we say it's allowed. So
again, it's to speak to things that we do not know about yet. Let's say, for instance, cannabis was not on the radar 10 years ago. And so if you didn't have language in that, and there was areas that did not want to support, let's say, cannabis sale, production, whatever it was, if this language wasn't in there, it's like it wasn't considered, so how can you prohibit it? So it's for what has not been considered. And there will be things come forward that are not considered, and then we don't have any position on those. So this language in there is to protect us against things that have not been considered yet.
I think I understand. I think in those situations, what I'd prefer is that when those things come up, that we come to the board and then we would add them to the bylaw in those moments, so we consider them in the moment, which would still address them in a way that I think is just feels a bit more transparent. I
get it, but it won't give us the ability, if it's something, and I don't know what it is because it hasn't been considered yet, but if it's something that the community does not support, we wouldn't be in a position to object to it because we didn't speak to it. So let's just say water bottling. If we had not considered it in the past, and somebody started the operation there and said, well, we didn't expressly consider water, you don't mention it, then you have no position on it. Like you're too late. So I think things like water bottling and cannabis are examples of things that are not considered. And in case things come forward that you haven't considered, that when they do, you and the community don't like them, this protects you against that.
So I just ask staff on the question of legal opinion, is that something you'd want to bring back under, in camera at the electoral area or at the board?
We could, I don't see why we couldn't do it at DEA's. Yeah.
Okay. It might alleviate any future motions that are.
Yeah. Yeah.
Frivolous.
And again, I don't think we need a motion. It's a bit discretionary on what we need to, but I think in terms of this, it is likely going to be helpful for everyone to get clarity and see what the reasoning is for that.
Or if you want to do it that way, just put it on the next agenda.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Giving that the lawyer will have it by the next year,
Yeah.
these things can take time.
Sure.
So but whenever we get it, we'll put it on the agenda, hopefully next meeting.
All right, well, we still got that motion on the floor, so I'll call a question. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried.
So just a question for myself then, because you passed a motion to remove that, that will go to the board, but I think I understood that you'd also wouldn't mind seeing a legal opinion.
Why,
I
you
can-
didn't include the phrase there to bring it back to electoral areas, maybe?
Oh,
And
did you?
to
Okay, all right,
bring
okay.
it back to
Okay, good.
ease.
Yeah, we'll do it that way, and
Okay,
then
perfect.
maybe we can clear it up. Okay, so Quadra Island bulk water regulation bylaw number 510 for receipt.
Move receipt.
Second.
Discussion? Director Malini.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you to staff for providing the additional information on this report showing the additions and deletions to the prohibitions. Knowing that licensing groundwater extraction is the purview of the province, my request for a bulk groundwater extraction and bottling bylaw was to create an opportunity for the community to have input on such an application if one was proposed. Paying attention to what has unfolded in Merville around bulk water extraction, sales, and bottling was a clear lesson to me on the value of having such prohibitions in place. When I originally asked for this bylaw, I was not aware that opening the prohibitions to add a prohibition on bulk groundwater extraction and bottling would necessitate adding and subtracting prohibitions as recommended by staff. Since this bylaw first came to the Electoral Area Services Committee and the board, I've received quite a lot of feedback about it, and I would say 90% or more are concerned with the blanket prohibition phrasing which has been added. My request to remove the paragraph received no traction with staff, so here it remains. I'm really excited to hear the legal opinion, and I'm really curious to see how that will affect this bylaw. At this time, I think it's important to go to the community and ask for their feedback on this proposed bylaw. I'm wondering if the community concerns outweigh the benefits of this proposed bylaw. It remains to be seen and will be best determined through a public information meeting. So after any further discussion here, I intend to move that bylaw 510 go to the board for first reading, and following first reading, a public meeting be organized to hear from Quadra Island residents.
Anything further? Or on receipt, yeah. All right, call a question on receipt. All those in favor? It's carried on receipt. A motion, Director Malini?
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to move the bylaw 510, Quadra Island bulk water regulation, go to the board for first reading, and following first reading, a public meeting be organized to hear from Quadra Island residents.
I'll second that.
Second by Director Ganesh. Any discussion? Director Malini?
Thank you. Maybe I could just have staff confirm that if we do first reading, or we were moving towards first reading, and then we have an opinion that comes back on this paragraph that's in question, the blanket prohibition, we're able to, I'm just hoping for confirmation that we are, as directors, able to edit or adjust the bylaw between first and third readings. So it's not set in stone once first reading happens.
Mr. Chairman, if I could, the board can make any amendments to any bylaw up until third reading. After that, it cannot. So, but no director can make amendments to a bylaw. That has to be done by the board and only the board. So I don't know if that clarifies.
I think so.
So I'm going to ask that the board, Mr. Chair, it's the full board that would, or Tom be the full board that would decide that?
In this case, Mr. Chairman, I believe only the electoral areas vote on zoning bylaws and amendments to zoning bylaws. So that would be a subset of the board. But no individual director can change a bylaw through an amendment process. So.
Okay, Director Mooney?
Thanks, Chair. I'm wondering if I should amend my motion to also ask that after the public information meeting, it comes back to the Electoral Area Services Committee for further conversation, or is that not appropriate after it's gone to first reading?
I think it's inherent in it. I personally think what you've laid out there is fine. Give it first reading, we'll do a public information meeting, we'll gather information from that, we'll bring that feedback back to EASC. We already have a motion about an in-camera legal opinion. We'll like to have those all intersect, ideally at the same meeting, so we can pull those together. I think it's good the way it is, so.
Great.
Anything further? Call the question. All those in favor? And that's carried. Number 4, bylaw number 517, electoral area D, rezoning RZ 11D 23, Johansson Hardcore Construction. For receipt.
Move receipt.
Second.
Second.
So, Mr. Chair, I have to give a little bit of editorial here. It wasn't Aniko, it was me that wrote the resolution here, and I likely have it in error, and that's out of a exercising caution with the new legislation. It's unfolding weekly, monthly. We have regular meetings everyone in local government does with the province. I personally feel every time, and I've attended many of those, Aniko has as well, there is generally about 6 to 8 provincial staff on these meetings. There is a couple hundred local government. And I find myself, when I'm on those meetings, hearing people ask questions and ministry staff within there giving different answers. Whether I'm just not paying clear enough attention, I don't know. But they're happening every couple weeks, it seems. They're rolling out policy manuals. The thing is organic. It's happening. There's more questions and answers. That's a long-winded intro into this public hearing issue on rezoning applications. So at a high level, the board is prohibited from holding public hearing meetings any longer with rezoning land use applications that have an impact on housing that are in line with the OCP. So that's fine. I think we've understood that a little bit. What was unclear to me on Friday, that is clear to me now, is that there is notification to be given prior to first reading. And traditionally, we'll have an application come. It will come to the board. You'll give it first and second reading, or the committee, and then we'll do public hearing or not, and get public input, information meetings, whatever's out there. Now, the legislation says there must be notification go out before it gets first reading. So when myself and Tom were trying to unwind this on Friday, I thought, well, how do I have the authority to give notification that a public hearing is not going to be held before the people we work for have not even received it? Aniko and I confirmed that with the province yesterday, that you do not have a choice. We must give that notification. So this is just a heads up that we will give you that notification concurrently, but there will be notification going out before we come here on rezoning applications that are in line with the OCP, giving notification before you see it. So I find that super unusual because it has to happen before first reading. So when I wrote this resolution, it was in line of, well, I'm not going to give notification until we've even received it. But the information we have from the province is you have no choice but to receive these. So that notification must go out before you even see first reading. So I don't know if you have, Aniko, a resolution that would replace this, or if you have subsequently provided notification, or you have it in the queue. But this recommendation that I wrote basically said, I'm bringing it here first, telling you you have to give notification, then I'll send notification out, which is inappropriate, as I've discovered.
Yeah,
Let me just
thank you.
ask, go ahead, Aniko. I was going to ask, so you give public notification, and what's the process for the public after they're notified? Do they any further involvement?
Well, as I understand it, I'm going to precurse everything I say with that, is that because there's no public hearing, there won't be on those, so that they're free to provide written, oral comment to anyone,
Right.
yourself, up until, third reading and adoption. There's nothing in between, if you will. So
Right.
they, as I understand it, they're not limiting communities' input on it, and it doesn't seem to have any kind of specific window or guidelines on it, just
Right.
prior to third.
So what would the time frame be that you would notify them, a week in advance of the electoral area meeting, or?
I'll let Aniko, I don't know that answer, yeah.
Thank you through the chair. The notification requirements are much the same actually as they have been previously. So the notification requirements would happen prior to first reading, with the notice to be not less than 3 or more than 10 days away from the date that the board is giving first reading. It's our understanding that comments with respect to the bylaw are actually received prior to first reading, not to third. I will clarify that, but that's our understanding to date. We do have a couple more sessions with the province coming up this week, so hope to clarify that point. But certainly the notice also is to inform the public of the bylaw and consideration of the proposal. It's not to provide notice that there is no public hearing. So it's very specific, similar to, I guess, actually like a variance application. We're familiar with that, which is why this isn't quite as unusual from a staff perspective as it may be to the committee, where we receive a variance application and that notification goes out before you see it. That's a requirement of the legislation. So we don't have an option to not do that. And again, in that scenario too, there's timing requirements, and we must meet those before the board gives consideration. And again, people have opportunity to provide comment prior to that, but not following that. So again, that's why we're assuming that this is the case here. But certainly, notification will be going out tomorrow. It's going to be in the newspaper next Wednesday in time for the January 24th meeting, where this bylaw will be given consideration for first reading. And again, opportunity for the public to provide comment prior to that.
Right. Okay, I understand. So it's probably for some of the remote areas won't be possible for written comment. So maybe my recommendation would just be that when you give notifications, you provide the email address of the SRD that people can have an opportunity to reply.
Thank you through the chair. The notification is quite prescriptive, and so the notification does advise the public how notification is received, and that is via email at our generic planning address. And they can also obviously mail or drop off as well. But yes, email at planning@srd.ca is the easiest way to get information to planning staff with respect to a bylaw consideration.
Very good.
So just one comment on that, because we're all participating and we're hearing answers from different people, and I respect what you heard, but there was many questions about that window of community input on that. And I can honestly say I'm unclear that it was, and I'm not questioning it, I'm just saying I'm unclear that those written comments had to happen before first reading. And they might have even contradicted themselves, and because I thought I'd heard them say up until third and final. But having said that, it's going to be on the board agenda, but the province has handed out collectively $51 million to local governments. I think we were somewhere in the $150,000 to help to help adopt and understand these new legislation. So what our plan is to do is continue on with the province, understanding these bills, work with a consultant, and then bring it back. I think it's more appropriate to East because the munis will be doing their things similarly. They have the same headaches. And likely hold a special East meeting or two just to talk about Bill 44, 47, 48, whatever the numbers are. So that I anticipate will happen in the next 2 to 3 months, that we'll do that because, again, it's organic. They're holding these meetings every week or two. There's hundreds of people on them, and I attend them, and I'm hearing different things on them, and questions are getting asked. So it's unraveling. Be a little bit patient, but I do plan on holding a special session for East so we can all better understand this stuff. But I don't think it's super clear to everyone in local government right now, so it might be a tad premature, but there is funding coming to support that.
That's all good. Just one further comment is that the notification will have to state the deadline. So
Yes, so
figured out.
the deadline is first reading. And further to that, because some local governments actually have the ability to give all readings at one meeting, and we're exploring that further too, but I think it's depending on how the voting weighs. So some local governments actually will be able to give all readings at one meeting, which is why your responses need to be received prior to first.
That is, challenging. So then that says to me there's basically hardly any input from what they're trying to do is limit or take away any input. And I understand, I'm not saying I agree with their intent, is that they don't want to relitigate the OCP. So they're saying, now, share if anyone's interested in it. This one yesterday or the day before was for regional districts. There's no legislative requirement for regional district window of time where you have to review your OCP. We have OCPs out there in the province from EAs that are decades old. And so people are saying, well, okay, if it's in line with a 25-year-old OCP, and you're taking away basically any input from a community to relitigate this stuff, and if all that has to come before first reading, I don't see that being popular in communities, but.
I don't think we'd want to do all 3 readings on the first day if we had any choice.
Yeah.
No, I'm not saying that either. However, if it is fact that that correspondence has to come in before first reading, so let's say this application right here, correspondences or notifications going out tomorrow, the board's meeting is January 24th, so whatever doesn't come in by then, we don't take any correspondence and that's it.
No, people still be allowed correspondence, right, even after the date? I mean, put it on the agenda as correspondence.
Really? I'm not sure. Yeah, no, I know. It's,
This is crazy.
yeah, so just trust us that we're trying to understand this, and it's literally happening, as we speak. But what's also happening, I see on these calls is, as people are having committee and board meetings and they have applications, there are arising questions from them, and then they're reintroducing that to the province, and then half the time they go, oh, okay, we'll have to get back to you. So I don't think this is the end of it. I don't know if any amendments are being changed, but there is, I can tell you, a lot of stuff in the legislation that was not considered. It doesn't affect us, but just one for everyone's morbid curiosity. There's these transit-oriented development zones, and they draw these circles around transit hubs. And somebody brought to their attention that the Burnaby SkyTrain station is physically larger than the transit hub circle itself. And they never envisioned that. So what happens outside this? Like there's just dozens of questions that are unanswered. So as we run into challenges ourselves that we'll find, we'll bring back and explore. But I think we're all just going to have to be a little bit patient, and we're learning this as we go. So.
Anything further on receipt? Director Van Ness first, and then Director Race.
Couple of things. One is the notice that we do give to the public, does it explicitly say, if you have comments on this to email? It does, yeah, it includes the email address in that, great. And then secondly, I know that all of these applications, there's a lot of work that's done before it gets to us today, for example. And it does seem, especially with what's happening with the province right now, that maybe if we just slow things down a little bit, and rather than we do everything all at once, that we just provide a little more space that's going to be more aligned with what the province is doing, that still gives a reasonable amount of public input to happen.
I don't disagree with that. It's counter of what they're trying to do, though. Right? They're trying to speed this up and take this all out. And I'm not saying I agree, but I understand what they're doing. They're saying you had an OCP, and then you created a zoning bylaw to follow that. That's done. If somebody comes forward, and it's not that simple, right? Especially in EAs, because there's OCPs out there that are decades old. Munis have to update their OCP every 5 years. They're not that old, right? So it's just not that simple. So if we take the position of, trying to slow it down, that's just pushing against what they're trying to do. So as we meander through this, I think we need to find a way to provide information without going at lightning speed. And I don't know what the answer is, but I get it. I mean, I wrote this. I appreciate that it's like, I send this stuff out, or Aniko does, and the first thing I get is, somebody calls me and goes, "What are you doing? I've never heard of this before." And I go, "Well, yeah, that doesn't make sense to me. So I wrote it this way, and it's wrong."
Yeah,
So
I have an easy answer to slow it down, just defer first reading till the next month. Director Race?
Thank you, Chair. The question that I had is that, if I understood correct, you're allowed to take comments up to first reading, but when I read through the information on this, these items were going to get referred back to the APC committee. So if we're only allowed to take comments up to first reading, then how do we take their comments?
Thank you through the chair. The APC meeting will be held prior to the board meeting, so comments will be considered as part of that.
Yep.
So that gives me one more question. My understanding is that some members of my APC committee are still out of country and not expected to be back until, I believe it's the end of February. And I think it's quite important that if we're going to have a very first meeting of the APC, that it's the full membership of it.
Yeah, I'll just say, Director Race, that we always have the option to defer first reading till they get back. Director Mooney?
if I could just, before Director Mulvaney, though, that just raises that we're going to have to, be more, I think, conscious of the APC and the timing of it with this legislation than we have in the past. We've had, I think, more flexibility, but this may reduce that. And anyways, we have to give that some thought about, yes.
Director Race, yeah.
And just one more comment, just for information for the new directors. This particular, the first development, so number 4 there, this already did have a public hearing back in 2022. And it's unfortunate that at the time of that public hearing, this developer couldn't get their stuff together. So believe it or not, this is part of the Oyster Bay development. So that all of that did go out to a public hearing and there was overwhelming support. So this is just adding on to that development. Thank you.
Director Mooney?
Thank you, Chair. I have a couple of lines of questions, and the first one is really around what our CAO was talking about with the first reading and how the board or the committee is now, I don't know, can't remember the language that you used, but essentially they must receive every application. So I'm wondering, is it possible to receive an application at one meeting and then recommend first reading at the next meeting, so that there is time? I think one of my questions is, I don't really understand, like, if we have an electoral area committee meeting once a month. So if an application is ready to hit the newspaper a week after our meeting, then will there be a staff report that accompanies that application that's available for residents to get more information from? Or is it only an ad in a newspaper or on the SRD Facebook page that tells them that there is a zoning amendment that is being contemplated? You know, I find quite often when these things come through that the constituents in Area C email me or call me and ask me questions. So if there's a time where the directors haven't even received a report on something, how are we supposed to answer people's questions if the only information that we have is the same as the ad?
Thank you, through the chair. We always ask that applicants or proponents or constituents call the SRD planning staff to answer any questions. Most of these questions are usually quite technical in nature or process-oriented. So we always do recommend that they call the office. The requirements of the notification require us to provide additional information with respect to the application. So as part of the notification, there is information related to that application, including a staff report, including bylaws, and any other relevant information available on our website. So at the time of notice, that is provided, and any resident could access that. There's also a binder that is available if they would like to come in and peruse it in office. They can come in and speak to staff. There's information with respect to telephone contacts also as part of the notice. So if they would like to telephone, they are welcome to do that. Regardless of when you decide to give first reading, the timing of the notification will be the same. The timing is legislated, not less than 3, more than 10 days. So it doesn't matter if you don't give first reading at one meeting, it's still going to have the same timing with respect to notification because that's what's legislated. And it's difficult to receive an application and not give first reading for it. The information that we received from the province is that every applicant deserves to have their application heard, and with respect to rezoning, that is consideration of first reading. So that is a requirement, which is why notification is provided prior to first reading, because first reading has to be considered. You don't have to provide it, but you must consider it.
Director Mooney?
Thank you. So if I'm understanding what you said correctly, the regulation or the legislation is that the community may receive a maximum of 10 days' notice in which to learn an application for a rezoning exists, understand the potential ramifications of that application, and provide feedback. And that not only is it a maximum of 10 days, but potentially could be only 3 days' notice before we have a meeting and have first reading, in which case any information or opinions which are received from the public after that 3 days' notice would be not eligible for contemplation.
Thank you, through the chair. That is what the legislation states. So the formal notification, those are the dates in line. With respect to the way the newspaper works here, it's typically always 7 days notice with respect to the formal notice. Notice is provided on our website prior to that. So typically within 2 weeks, there's notice provided on our website and through our social media, that's what's legislated for notification requirements, and that's what the province is continuing to require as part of the new legislation.
Okay, Director Mooney?
Thank you. My final thought on that is that, I represent a rural community that has, I think, 100 or so Campbell Vermeers dropped off in 2 locations. And providing that 3 to 10 days or maybe 7 days notice in some newspapers that probably somebody picked up and used for fire starter it just doesn't seem like adequate consultation. So hopefully when we come back with another conversation that, as our CAO is saying, will happen, we can brainstorm and come up with some better ideas so that our communities do truly continue to feel included and consulted in these decisions.
I can say one thing quite confidently because that similar kind of narrative gets raised. They keep saying we're not going to relitigate or consult the OCP that was already done. So you don't need to consult. That's their argument. Now, the counter to that is you can say, well, we haven't done our OCP in 10, 20 years. And their answer is, well, that's your problem, right? So their narrative is you don't need to consult because you've already done it. I'm saying at times that was done, like in Area D, it's a much different argument than in Quadra, right? He just rubber stamped his. So if somebody came to Director Rice and said, on this application, it's outrageous, this should go to public hearing, he says, the ink isn't dry on the OCP, we just did it, it's in line with it. That makes a whole lot of sense. That supports what the province is saying. In other areas where they're old, it's just like half the people don't live here that consulted with the OCP, right? Mm-hmm. So then their argument is, well, get your OCP done. Yeah.
Director.
I just wanted to comment on Director Mahoney's comments there. I think just being careful to I think staff are doing their best to deal with what's coming down through the province, and it sounds like a very much work in progress. So appreciate your frustrations and also recognize that staff are scrambling to figure out the best way to do this as well. A couple of thoughts. One is just on top of Director Rice's comments around how to engage APC. If we could adjust that so that APC meetings could happen online, that might allow us to do things quicker and fit a faster schedule and be more accessible for folks to be able to come together sooner. And then secondly, on the notification side of things, it might be useful for staff to consider, sending an email to the director of the affected area, providing information that they can distribute through their email list, and some strategy for how to do that. That might be a way that supports staff in getting the word out. Thanks.
And I just one comment, if I might. As in the last AAP, Area A doesn't receive newspapers, and staff put it on social media, which was very effective. So if that could happen on these notifications, that would be excellent.
Yes, thank you through the chair. That is a normal process. So in addition to newspaper, we do Facebook and our SRD website, and we also connect with some of our community groups as well so that they can spread the word. Thank you.
Very good. Okay. We're on receipt? Yes, go ahead. Director Mooney.
Sorry, I have a question about the actual item. And the OCP for Area D is like exactly what Dave said. The ink is still wet on it. It's just a month old. And my question is really because Area C is entering soon into an OCP process. So I thought it was worthwhile inquiring and maybe possibly learning about this. So the OCP for Area D says that it has a planning strategy that says that the area north of Henry Road will be maintained as a mix of single detached dwellings, local commercial services, and that the area south of Henry Road will be maintained as a rural community with farms, forests, and protected wildlife habitat. So I had to use Google Maps, but I did figure out that this proposal is south of Henry Road, the rural forest and wildlife side of Henry Road. And the OCP's next statement is that a strategy to manage and reduce consumption of land is the most important element of protecting the most valued features of the planning area. And the loss of ecosystem connectivity and ecosystem services must be considered. And that to protect the natural features of the land areas used to accommodate new lots and homes should be closely managed. So the 53-acre property in this topic here is zoned upland resource, and the application says that it's been logged and there's no remaining commercial timber. So I was just curious. I mean, I know that the OCP maps it as a residential area and not uplands resource. I don't even know if the uplands resource is considered in the OCP as a map. It's just more like TFLs and private managed forest lands. So I was just curious the metrics for deciding that the uplands resource zone property met these statements that are in the OCP.
So thank you through the chair to clarify. Given development that has occurred over the years in this area, the upland resource designation doesn't really apply to the lands that are remaining in scope or size. So the upland resource designation was initially put into play, exactly like you said, for forestry-related uses, and typically those that were owned by forestry companies or managed through the province through license. But in these cases, these forestry companies have moved away from production on these lands. It's been deemed as not economical, and these lands have been subdivided off and parceled out to individual private owners. The area has been redesignated through recent applications as rural residential, which is more in line with the size and scope of those lands. And so the criteria for this application meet those rural residential policies within the OCP.
Thank you.
So I have just one question for staff on that. Sometimes courts are accused of interpreting laws for their friends and enforcing them for their enemies. When it comes to the interpretation of an OCP, who is the final authority on the interpretation? Is it the board? Is it staff? Or is it the court? How does that work?
Well, that's a difficult question to answer, but I think realistically it's the board or a subset of the board, whoever's responsible for making decisions. Staff simply make recommendations, of course. And any decision of a board that is challenged, of course, will go before the court, and a judge will decide whether the decision was reasonable in the circumstance. So there are different levels of decision-making involved. So I'm not sure your question has a finite answer.
Okay.
It depends.
Thank you. All right, so where are we, on receipt?
Yes.
So we'll call the question on receipt then. All those in favor? That's carried.
Do we have, could we have prepared then an appropriate resolution?
Thank you. Yes, through the chair. The recommendation would read that as notice is to be given in accordance with Section 4671 of the Local Government Act, the committee recommend that bylaw 517, Johnson Hardcore Construction, be forwarded to the board for first and second readings.
Let me just ask, do we have to give it second as well, or is first adequate?
Typically, you would give first and second at one meeting, and then you would come back to a following meeting for third and final adoption.
Okay. Do we have a motion? Did we have someone like to move that?
I'll move that. Thank you.
Second, Director Vanesh. Discussion, call a question. All those in favor? And that is carried. Thank you, Aniko. All right, Electoral D rezoning RZ 1D22 Crest for receipt.
Move receipt.
Second.
So exactly as I just said before, same thing. I wrote the resolution, which is dated, and hopefully Aniko has a similar resolution ready.
All right, on receipt, got anything there? All right, call a question, all in favor? And that's carried. And the resolution, Aniko? Recommended resolution?
Thank you, through the chair. The recommendation would be that as notice is to be provided in accordance with Section 4671 of the Local Government Act. The committee recommend that bylaw number 518 Crest be forwarded to the board for first and second readings.
I'll move that recommendation.
Second.
Director Race and Director Vaness. Call a question. All those in favor? And that's carried. Number 6, bylaw 522 Cortez Island Dog Control Service for receipt.
Move receipt.
Second.
Discussion?
So I'll give a little background here because we may have, there may be some confusion in terms of how the process of establishing a service goes. And I appreciate what Director Vonish has challenged with here. So in order to write the regulations of in the weeds of a service, you need the service. So the Local Government Act says at a high level, this is what you can do within a service. Regulatory services, I would say, are often supported by the director, so they wouldn't go out to AP. So we say, hey, look, you support it, and then we'll bring you back the regulatory bylaw, and we can discuss the weeds, kind of like the fire one. Going to AAP instead of that means so we can't put the cart before the horse. We can't write this regulatory bylaw to a service that we don't have yet. So we say, hey, is everyone interested in service? And like you say, they go, well, what is it and how much is it going to cost? So we can't write that first. So what we can do is in terms of saying, hey, we have this high-level service that we can do a lot of things within, but if we put out a number there, that will limit us to how much we're going to charge and practically what you can do. So what I've tried to do for you here is say we can amend that regulatory service bylaw and put a number in it and go out to the folks and say, are you supporting of this service? We'll collect whatever, 3 cents. And then if you support that, like, I'll just give you an example. I think the 3 cents was $20,000. There's no way you're going to be able to apprehend or have storage for animals or anything for that kind of money. So that, in my mind, the amount of money limits what you can do. It's pretty high level. So that's the best we can do if you want to go out to an AAP. When people ask you, what are you going to do? Say, well, I'm only going to charge this much, which limits what we can do. Once this is approved, if it's approved, then we can get into the weeds of that. So what we initially did is saying, hey, do you support the service? And like you said, people are going to go, well, how much is that going to cost and what is it? And we can't do that yet. But I can put a limit on there. And then when we come back and you say, I want all these things being done. I know you don't, but you go, well, we only have room to do this stuff, right? So this is the best option I have for you if you want to continue on that.
Thank you. I appreciate it. This is, pretty highly controversial issue on Cortez, very emotional, lots of people on both ends of the spectrum, strongly opinionated and highly emotional about the issue. And this came out from an initial petition that was presented to the board with 106 people signing, saying that they wanted a dog bylaw after some unfortunate dog incidents on Cortez. And I think by going to AAP, an alternative approval process, back to Cortez, it allows us to get a stronger feeling of what people actually think on Cortez. And for those listening online and watching this, basically what it means, it's our way of consulting with Cortez Island, saying, hey, do you want this service to house this potential bylaw? And if 10% of the electorate/landowners write in against it, then it would kill the service. I think that's a fair response to the survey. To the petition. If I had a petition with 500 people on it, then I'd probably go directly and say, okay, let's do this. It's very clear that people in Cortez want it. But I think this is a fair way to give both sides a real opportunity to have their voice heard. And it is tricky for folks to wrap their head around the idea that, okay, you need to have a service before a bylaw can be created. And I think you've explained it well, Dave, and just for folks that are watching, because there is a cost to administer a potential dog control bylaw, we need to create a service that houses that cost. And then that's, as has been pointed out here, we have a couple of options here that are 3 cents per $1,000 of property assessment or 6 cents. The average property on Cortez is $636,000 of the assessment, so a 3 cent would be roughly $18, $20 per property as a maximum. And then if this did get approved through the AAP process, we would go back and we'd work with staff, develop bylaws that are appropriate for Cortez, but also fit within that potential budget. The feedback from what I've heard on Cortez is that people are looking for making sure that dogs are either on leash or under control in public areas, and for some sort of way that people can call in dogs that are repeatedly violent or jumping up on people or chasing wildlife or farm animals, and that the police can come in and deal with it. So if this does pass through an AAP process, I think what I'm going to be voting today is option A. Option B, that we go through an AAP process at the potential of 3 cents per $1,000, and then that if that passes, then going back to the community and figuring out what exactly we want to be included in this bylaw. I appreciate everybody that has written into me and voiced their opinion and called me and Facebooked me and all the ways you all interact with me. And I just want to recognize that I'm trying to move forward what is presented in front of me and give everybody a chance to have their voice heard.
Okay, we'll finish up with receipt first. On receipt then, anything further? Call the question, all those in favor? And that's carried. And a motion, Director Benesh?
I move option B, that the committee recommend that bylaw number 522 be amended to include an annual requisition limit of 3 cents per $1,000 of property assessments, and that it be resubmitted to the Inspector of Municipalities for approval before proceeding with an alternative approval process.
Second, Director Maloney. Discussion, all those in favor? And that is carried. All righty, no correspondence, Director's reports, new business, addendums, closed session, motion for termination.
Move to terminate.
Second.
All those in favor? Thank you, that's carried.
I think you have nothing to lose by